Salman Al-Farsi, the seeker of truth. This time, our hero hails from Persia. Indeed, in later years, many from that region came to embrace Islam. Some of those Muslims were unsurpassable in both their faith and their knowledge of religion and worldly affairs. Indeed, from all over the world, Islam birthed Muslim philosophers, physicians, jurists, astronomers, inventors, and mathematicians. They came from various nations, but their religion remained one. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had prophesied this blessed spread of his religion. Indeed, he had been so promised by his Almighty Lord. He had pointed to the time, place, and day, and he had seen in his vision the banner of Islam fluttering in all corners of the earth and over the palaces of its earthly rulers. Salman Al-Farsi, the Persian, bore witness to this, and was, in fact, firmly connected with what happened. It was the day of Al-Khandaq, the trench, in the year 5, year of the Hijra, when the leaders of the Jews approached Mecca to form an alliance against the Prophet and the Muslims. They asked the polytheists there to form a treaty and enter into a decisive battle to eradicate this new religion. The war was planned. The Quraysh army and its allies would attack Medina from the outside, while the Banu Qurayza would attack them from within. They would come from behind the ranks of the Muslims to crush them from inside out. And so, one day, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Muslims were taken unaware by an enormous well-armed army marching on Medina. The Quran depicts the scene thus: when they came against you from above you and from below you, and your eyes turned away, and your hearts reached to your throats, and you imagined vain thoughts about God. In that place the believers were tried and shaken most severely. Under the command of Abu Sufyan and Uyayna ibn Hisn, 24,000 fighters were advancing on Medina to storm and lay siege to it. Their aim was to rid themselves of Muhammad, peace be upon him, his religion, and his companions, once and for all. This hybrid army was an alliance of all the tribes who had common interests that were threatened by Islam. It was a last and decisive attempt, embarked on by all the enemies of the Prophet, peace be upon him, based upon individual, collective, and tribal concerns. The Muslims found themselves in a precarious situation. The Prophet, peace be upon him, assembled his companions for consultation. They were gathered to reach a decision on defense and battle, but how could they even put up a defense? Just then, a tall man with flowing hair, Salman Al-Farsi, for whom the Prophet, peace be upon him, bore great respect, raised his head and looked at Medina. The city was surrounded by hills and exposed open country, which could be easily broken into by the enemy. Salman had much experience in warfare and its tactics in his native Persia. So, he proposed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, something which the Arabs had never seen before in battle. It was the digging of a trench in the exposed places around Medina. Allah only knows what could have become of the Muslims in that battle had they not dug that trench. It was no sooner seen by the Quraysh than they were stunned into despair. The forces of the enemy still remained in their tents for a month, unable to take Medina, until Allah sent them a storm one night, which devastated their tents and tore them asunder. Then Abu Sufyan announced to his forces that they should return to where they had come from. They were despondent and frustrated. During the excavation of the trench, Salman took his place among the Muslims as they dug and removed the sand. The Prophet himself was also taking part in digging with Salman's group. Their pickaxes could not smash a stubborn rock, in spite of the fact that Salman was of strong build. A single stroke of his would normally break a rock to pieces, but he stood in front of this stubborn one. He let all those around him try to break it, but in vain. Salman went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, to ask him to divert the trench around that stubborn and challenging rock. The Prophet returned with Salman to see the rock himself. When he saw it, he called for a pickaxe and asked the companions to keep back from the splinters. He said, "In the name of Allah, and then raised his blessed firm hands, gripping the pickaxe, and let it fall. The rock cracked, letting out a great shaft of light. Salman said that he himself saw that light shining upon Medina. The Prophet, peace be upon him, raised the pickaxe and gave a second blow, and the rock broke further. At that moment the Prophet said loudly, "Allahu Akbar! Allah is the greatest. I have been given the keys to Rome. Its red palaces have been lit for me, and my nation has vanquished it." The Prophet, peace be upon him, struck a third blow. The rock shattered with a blinding light. The Prophet told them that he was now seeing the palaces of Syria, Sana'a, and others like them, the world over, where the banner of Islam would flutter one day. The Muslims shouted in deep faith, "This is what Allah and His Prophet have promised us." Salman was the originator of the project to dig the trench, and he was associated with the rock out of which poured some secrets of the unseen and of destiny. When he called the Prophet, peace be upon him, to break it, he stood by his side, saw the light himself, and heard the glad omen. In fact, he lived to see the prophecy fulfilled, and abided in its living reality. He saw the great capitals of Persia and Rome, Byzantium, the palaces of Sana'a, Syria, Egypt, and Iraq. We have a first-hand account from Salman Al-Farsi, as he sits in the shade of a tree by his house in Medina, telling guests about his great adventures in the quest for truth. He explains to them how he abandoned the religion of his Persian people for Christianity, and then for Islam, how he abandoned his father's wealth and estate, and threw himself into the arms of the wilderness in the quest for the release of his tension and his soul, how he was sold in a slave market on his way to search for truth, and how he finally met with the Prophet, peace be upon him, and how he came to believe in him. Now, let us listen to his grand tale from the companion himself. "I come from Isfahan, from a place called Jai. I was the most beloved son of my father, who was a figure of high esteem among his people. We used to worship fire. I devoted myself to the worship of fire until I became custodian of the fire, which we lit, and never allowed it to be extinguished. My father had an estate. One day he sent me there. I passed by a Christian church and heard them praying. I went in and saw what they were doing. I was impressed by what I saw in their prayers. I said, 'This is better than our religion.' I did not leave them until sunset, nor did I go to my father's estate, nor did I return to my father until he sent people in search of me. I asked the Christians about their prayers, which impressed me, and about the origin of their religion. They answered, 'In Syria.' I said to my father when I returned to him, 'I passed by people praying in a church of theirs, and I was impressed by their prayer, and I could see that their religion is better than ours.' He questioned me, and I questioned him, and then he put fetters on my feet and locked me up. Then I sent word to the Christians, saying I had entered their religion, and I requested that whenever a caravan came from Syria, they should tell me before its return, in order for me to travel with them, and so they did. I broke loose from the iron fetters and I escaped. I set out with them for Syria. While I was there, I asked about their learned man, and I was told that he was the bishop, leader of the church. I went to him and told him my story. I lived with him, serving, praying, and learning. But this bishop was not faithful in his religion, because he used to gather money from the people to distribute it, but he would keep it for himself. Then he died. They appointed a new leader in his place. I have never seen a man more godly than he in his religion, nor more active in his bid for the hereafter, nor more pious in the world, nor more punctual at worship. I loved him more than I had ever loved any other person before. When his fate came, I asked him, 'To whom would you recommend me, and to whom would you leave me?' He said, 'O my son, I do not know anyone who is on the path that I am on, and who leads the kind of life I lead, except a certain man in Mosul.' When he died, I went to that man in Mosul, and told him the story, and I stayed with him as long as Allah wished me to stay. Then death approached him, too. So, I asked him, 'To whom would you advise me to go to?' He directed me to a pious man in Nisabin. So, I went to him and told him my story. I stayed with him as long as Allah wished me to stay. When death overtook him, I asked him as before. He told me to meet a person at Amoria in Byzantium. So, to Byzantium I went and stayed with that man, earning my living there by rearing cattle and sheep. Then death approached him as well, and I asked him, "To whom should I go?" He said, "O my son, I know no one anywhere who is on the path we have been on, so that I can tell you to go to him, but you have been overtaken by an epoch in which there will appear a prophet in the pure creed of Abraham. He will migrate to the place of palm trees. If you can be sincere to him, then do so. He has signs which will be manifested. He does not eat of charity, yet he accepts gifts, and between his shoulders is the seal of prophethood. When you see him, you will know him." A caravan passed by me on that day. I asked them where they had come from, and learned that they were from the Arabian Peninsula. So, I told them, "I give you these cattle and sheep of mine in return for your taking me to your land." They agreed. So, they took me in their company until they brought me to Wadi al-Qura, and there they wronged me. They sold me to a Jew. I saw many palm trees, and cherished the hope that it was the land that had been described to me and which would be the future place of the advent of the prophet. But it was not. I stayed with this Jew until another from Banu Qurayza came to him one day and bought me from him. I stayed with him until we came to Medina. By Allah, I had hardly seen it when I knew that it was the land described to me. I stayed with the Jew, working for him on his plantation in Banu Qurayza, until Allah sent his prophet, who later emigrated to Medina and dismounted at Quba among the Banu Amr ibn Auf. Indeed, one day, I was at the top of a palm tree with my master sitting below it, when a Jewish man came. He was a cousin of his, and said to him, "May Allah destroy Banu Quba. They are spreading a rumor about a man at Quba who came from Makkah claiming that he is a prophet." By Allah, he had hardly said it when I was seized by a tremor, and the palm tree shook until I almost fell on my master. I climbed down quickly, saying, "What are you saying? What news?" My master gave me a nasty slap and said, "What have you got to do with this? Return to your work." So, I returned to work. At nightfall, I gathered what I had and went out until I came upon the prophet at Quba. I entered and found him sitting with some of his companions. Then I said, "You are in need and a stranger. I have some food which I intend to give out as charity. When they showed me your lodgings, I thought you most deserve it, so I have come to you with it." I put the food down. The prophet, peace be upon him, said to his companions, "Eat in the name of Allah." He abstained and never took of it. I said to myself, "This, by Allah, is one sign. He does not eat of charity." I returned to meet the prophet, peace be upon him, again the next day, carrying some food, and said to him, "I can see that you do not partake of charity. I have something which I want to give to you as a present." I placed it before him. He said to his companions, "Eat in the name of Allah," and he ate with them. So, I said to myself, "This indeed is the second sign. He eats of presents." I returned and stayed away for a while. Then I came to him, and I saw him sitting, having returned from a burial, and surrounded by his companions. He had 2 garments, carrying one on his shoulder and wearing the other. I greeted him, then bent to see the upper part of his back. He knew what I was looking for, so he threw aside his garment off his shoulder, and, behold, the sign between his shoulders, the seal of prophethood, was clear, just as the Christian monk had described. At once, I staggered towards him, kissing him and weeping. He called to me to come forward, and I sat before him. I told him my story, as you have already heard me describe the events. When I became a Muslim, slavery prevented me from taking part in the battles of Badr and Uhud. Therefore, the Prophet, peace be upon him, advised me, "Go into terms with your master, for him to free you." And so I did. The Prophet told the companions to assist me, and Allah freed me from bondage. I became a free Muslim, taking part with the Prophet, peace be upon him, in the Battle of Handak, and others. With these simple words, Salman spoke of his noble and sacrificial adventure. Throughout his life, he sought true religion, and finally found Islam. and it was Allah's guidance that helped Salman find his place in the world. Salman achieved greatness through his restless spirit, a spirit that withstood difficulties and defeated them. He showed an unrelenting devotion to the truth. That sincerity led him voluntarily away from the estate of his father with all its wealth and luxury to the wilderness with its difficulties and suffering. He moved from land to land, town to town. He sought new acquaintances, worshipped, persevered, and searched for his destiny among varied people, sects, and different ways of life. Throughout all this, he adhered to the truth for the sake of guidance, until he was sold into slavery. After this, he was rewarded by Allah with the best of rewards. He brought Salman to the truth and brought him into the presence of his Prophet, peace be upon him. And Allah went on to grant him a long life, long enough for him to see the banner of Islam fluttering in all parts of the world. Salman's character was one of nobility and truth, and he lived a God-fearing life. In terms of the company he kept, he was the person nearest to Umar ibn al-Khattab, and his piety was clear from the time he spent at Abu Abdada's home. Abu Abdada was known to pray all night and fast all day. Salman actually reprimanded him for this excessive worship. One day, he decided to stop him from fasting, explaining that it was supererogatory. Abu Abdardar asked him, "Would you prevent me from fasting for my Lord and from praying to him?" Salman replied, "No, but your eyes have a claim over you. Your family has a claim over you. So fast intermittently, then pray and sleep." Salman's advice reached the Prophet, peace be upon him, who said, "Salman is, indeed, full of knowledge." The Prophet, peace be upon him, was often impressed by Salman's wisdom and knowledge, just as he was impressed by his character and religion. On the day of Al-Khandaq, the Ansar stood up and said, "Salman is of us." The Muhajiran stood up also and said, "Salman is of us." The Prophet responded to them too, saying, "Salman is of us, O people of the house, Prophet's house." Indeed, he deserved this honor. He was held in the minds of Prophet's companions with the highest regard, and in the greatest position and respect. Ali ibn Abu Talib nicknamed him Luqman the Wise. When asked about Salman after his death, Ali said, "Who among you is like Luqman the Wise? He was a man of knowledge who absorbed all the scriptures of the people of the book. He was like a sea that was never exhausted." Also, during the caliphate of Omar, he came to Medina on a visit, and Omar accorded him what he had never accorded to anyone before, when he assembled his companions and said, "Come, let us go out and welcome Salman." They went on to receive him at the border of Medina. After meeting him, Salman lived alongside the Prophet, peace be upon him, and after becoming a free Muslim, he would always worship with him too. He lived through the caliphates of Abu Bakr, Umar, and finally, Uthman, in whose era he met his Lord. Throughout these years, Islam began to spread everywhere, and the treasures of Islam were carried back to Medina. These treasures were then distributed to the people in the form of regular allowance and fixed salaries. Consequently, the responsibilities of governance increased on all fronts. So, where did Salman stand in this respect? Open your eyes. Do you see that humble man sitting there in the shade, making baskets and utensils out of palm fronds? That is Salman. Take a good look at him. Look at his modest garment, which is so short that it only sits at his knees. That was Salman in his old age. He received a grant of 4,000 to 6,000 dirhams a year, but he distributed all of it, refusing to take a dirham. He used to say, "I would buy palm fronds with 1 dirham to work on, and then sell it for 3 dirhams. I retained 1 dirham of it as capital, spent 1 dirham on my family, and gave away 1 dirham, and if Umar ibn al-Khattab prevented me from that, I would not stop." It is often presumed that the piety of the companions, such as Abu Bakr, Umar, Abu Dar, and so on, was influenced by the general life of the Arabian Peninsula, where the Arabs found pleasure in simplicity. And yet, here we are with a Persian man, from the land of pleasure, luxury, and civilization. He was not poor, but from the upper class of his society, and now he was refusing property, wealth, and enjoyment, insisting that he live on 1 dirham a day from the work of his hands. Salman was known to refuse positions of authority, unless related to battle, and only if no one else was suitable for it, and it was forced upon him. Even then he would accept it with shyness. When he finally accepted leadership, which was also forced upon him, he refused to take his lawful dues. Hisham ibn Hassan relates from Hassan that the allowance of Salman was 5,000. He lived among 30,000 people and used to dress in a garment cut into halves. He wore one and sat on the other half. Whenever his allowance was due him, he distributed it to the needy and lived on the earnings of his hands. Why do you think he was doing all this work and worshipping with such devotion? You can hear his own reply. While he was on his deathbed, readying to meet his lord, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas went to greet him, and Salman wept. Sa'd said, "What makes you weep, O Abu Abdullah? The Prophet of Allah died pleased with you." Salman replied, "By Allah, I am not weeping in fear of death, nor for love of the world. But the Prophet of Allah put me on an oath. He said, 'Let any of you have in this world like the provision of the traveler, and here I have owned many things around me.'" Sa'd said, "I looked around, and I saw nothing but a water pot and vessel to eat in. Then I said to him, 'O Abu Abdullah, give us a parting word of advice for us to follow.' He said, 'O Sa'd, remember Allah for your carers, if you have any. Remember Allah in your judgment, if you judge. Remember Allah when you distribute the share.'" This was the man who filled his spirit with riches, just as it filled him with renunciation of the pleasures of this world. The oath, which he and the rest of the companions had taken before the Prophet of Allah, was that they must not let the world possess them, and that they should take nothing from it but the provision of the traveler in his bag. Salman had truly kept that oath, yet his tears still ran when he saw his soul preparing for departure, fearing that he had transgressed limits. There was barely anything around him when he passed, and yet still he considered himself lavish. During the days of Umar's rule over Medina, Salman never changed his way. He had refused, as we have seen, to receive his salary as a leader, and simply went on weaving baskets to earn a living. His dress was no more than a gown, resembling his old clothes in simplicity. One day, while on the road, Salman met a man arriving from Syria, carrying a load of figs and dates. The load was too heavy for him and made him weary. No sooner did the Syrian see the man in front of him, who appeared to be a commoner and a poor person, bethought of putting the load on his shoulders, and in return he would give him something for his labor when he reached his destination. So he beckoned to the man, Salman, the governor, and he came up to him. The Syrian said to him, "Relieve me of this load." He carried it, and they walked together. While on their way, they met a group of people. He greeted them, and they stood up in reverence, replying, "And unto the governor be peace." "Who is the governor?" the Syrian asked himself. His surprise increased when he saw some of them rushing towards Salman to take the load off his shoulders. "Let us carry it, O governor." When the Syrian knew that he was the governor of Medina, he was astonished. Words of apology and regret tumbled from his lips, and he went forward to grab the load. But Salman shook his head in refusal, saying, "No, not until I take you to your destination." He was asked one day, "What troubles you in leadership?" He replied, "The pleasure of nurturing it and the bitterness of meaning." A friend of his came to him one day at his house and found him kneading dough. He asked him, "Where is your servant?" He replied, "We have sent her on an errand, and we hate to charge her with 2 duties." When we say his house, let us remember what kind of house it was. When Salman thought of building it, he asked the mason, How are you going to build it?" The mason was courteous and yet witty. He knew the piety and devotion of Salman, so he replied to him saying, "Fear not. It is a house for you to protect yourself against the heat of the sun and dwell in the cold weather. When you stand erect in it, it touches your head." Salman said to him, "Yes, that is it. So go on and build it." There was nothing of the goods of this world which could attract Salman for a moment, nor did they leave any traces in his heart, except one thing, which he was particularly mindful of and had entrusted to his wife, requesting her to keep it far away in a safe place. In his last sickness, and in the morning on which he gave up his soul, he called her, "Bring me the trust which I left in safekeeping." She brought it, and behold, it was a bottle of musk. He had gained it on the day of liberating the city of Jalwala, and kept it to be his perfume on the day of his death. Then he called for a pot of water, sprinkled the musk into it, stirred it with his hand, and then said to his wife, "Sprinkle it on me, for there will now come to me creatures from the creatures of Allah. They do not eat food, and what they like is perfume." Having done so, he said to her, "Shut the door and go down." She did what he bade her to do. After a while she went up to him and saw his blessed soul had departed his body. It was gone to the Supreme Master, and it ascended with the desire to meet him, as he had an appointment there with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his two companions, Abu Bakr and Umar, the noble circle of martyrs. Long had the burning desire stirred Salman. The time had come for him to rest in peace.